because everything about it was absurd. For one, the only reason most of those candidates were on the stage in the first place was pure vanity. There's not a single candidate there that has a prayer of winning the nomination. Asa Hutchinson, for one, the former governor of Missouri, was most famous for having his career ruined by Tucker Carlson after he vetoed a ban on men and girls sports. He's polling at 1% in the last poll I saw. He has no constituency. He's almost universally hated in the party. So why is he running? Why even take the time? Why be on stage? Well, it's so we can increase his public profile in order to try for a seat on Walmart's board of advisors once he inevitably leaves politics. Then you have Doug Burnham, who seems like a nice guy, but nobody's ever heard of him. And he was clearly spooked on stage, not quite ready for the big leagues like the rest of the guys. And then you have Chris Christie, whose only purpose in the primary is to sabotage President Trump. This is a guy with a net favorability rating around negative 30%. And I mean, how many times has this guy run for president at this point? He's obviously on stage because he thinks he can do some damage to Trump, who he has a personal animus against. But he also knows that when the campaign is over, he, like a lot of these people, are going to leave and get speaking gigs and book deals and spots on primetime CNN and MSNBC. And then apart from them, you have the old guard neocons. Those are people like Nikki Haley and Tim Scott, both from South Carolina. But it's hard to tell what world someone like Nikki Haley even lives in. We're in a time right now when Republicans are sick of never-ending wars abroad and a culture that relentlessly denigrates men, usually coming from the left. Except now her whole persona is about being a wannabe girl boss who wants to drop bombs on every country on the planet. At one point, she quoted Margaret Thatcher saying, "If you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman." Unfortunately, she doesn't seem to have half the wit Thatcher had and forgot that it'll be predominantly men who fight and die in all the wars she wants to start. And throughout the debate, we heard a lot of talk about fiscal responsibility. Now, I'm all for fiscal responsibility. I'm a fiscal conservative. We need to have balanced budgets. We can't run up massive deficits, and we absolutely have to reduce spending. But honestly, it's kind of a joke to hear career politicians, including or really especially people like Tim Scott, who's been in the Senate for 10 years and happily goes along with whatever big spending bill Mitch McConnell pitches. But it's kind of a joke to hear career politicians, including or especially people like Tim Scott, who's been in the Senate for 10 years and happily goes along with whatever big spending bill Mitch McConnell pitches. It's kind of a joke to hear somebody like that talk about fiscal responsibility. Would I'd rather hear somebody like Tim Scott, something that would be a lot more interesting and useful rather than empty promises of fiscal austerity. I'd rather hear Tim Scott talk about a realistic understanding of the budget and how it can be used for our side's benefit. If we can't cut the budget, and we've shown for the past 20 or 30 years that we can't, let's at least use it to promote our side for our benefit. That's what the left does. So instead of talking about cutting spending, maybe say something like, I'll do my best to cut spending, but when I can't, I'll do my best to funnel government money to right-wing political organizations and cut funding for left-wing ones. In other words, I'm going to do exactly what the left does. I'm going to use the federal government to punish my enemies and reward my allies, and I'll use the budget to do it. Something like that would actually be refreshing and interesting, especially compared to regurgitated talking points from 1994. Maybe with a stronger political base in the future, at some point we can work on cutting the deficit, but given the political situation, that's not happening anytime soon. And right now, the biggest issues of our time aren't the budget or fiscal deficits. The biggest issues are immigration, crime, inflation, a deteriorating culture, election fraud, and government weaponization. Our country is completely unraveling it at the seams, and everybody can see it happening, at least everybody except the people on the stage last week at the debate. So despite how dire our country's position is, we have, as Vivek Ramaswamy pointed out in the debate, We have these Morning in America speeches about how great times are. Tim Scott gives a big spiel about how the American dream is alive and well, and he's proof of it. He grew up in poverty, and now he's a senator. And his point is that he did it so you can do it too. That's what he said. Well, that's great that he did it, but he was born almost 60 years ago. Things have changed a lot since then. He doesn't seem to have realized it, but the rest of us do. For millions of Americans, the opportunity for upward mobility is fading away fast. It's getting more and more difficult to move from a lower socioeconomic class to the middle class and the upper classes. And saying that the American dream is alive and well simply doesn't seem true for a lot of Americans. I'll give you an example. There was a poll recently that was asking teachers in public schools what are the biggest problems that they face with students. And when Tim Scott was in public school, this was years and years ago, I think the first poll was asked in the 50s. The biggest problems in schools were things like running in the classrooms, chewing gum, talking out of line. And the same poll was asked in 2018. And the biggest problems then were things like violence, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and suicide. That's how much our public schools have deteriorated. So to pretend like opportunities that were alive and well in America 60 years ago are still available is kind of a joke, and it's almost insulting. We're not in the same country that we were 40 years ago. And that's not even considering the flagrant political persecution the left has been pursuing. I mean, last week, Democrats arrested over a dozen of the leaders of their political opposition, including the former president, over blatantly political charges. The DOJ is targeting their opposition and silencing dissent, all so far with impunity. So we need leaders who recognize that it's not morning in America. We're in a very, very dark time in the country's history. And if we're going to be successful at fighting it, we can't live in this made-up fantasy world of 1950s America. The country you and they grew up in doesn't exist. And we've got to have leaders who realize that. And that's another point. When people are hurting, and they are hurting right now, the last thing you want to do is tell them that everything is going great. When you do that, that means either, one, you're so out of touch with reality that you have no understanding of what's happening in the country, or two, you just don't care about the people you're serving. Things are good for you, so to hell with everybody else. It's one or the other. There's no alternative. But either way, it's disqualifying, and it really is disqualifying for just about every candidate on stage last week. And that's what we see from far too many of the establishment now. Things are good for them. They seem blissfully unaware of what's happening in the rest of the country. The performance last week from the establishment candidates was a clear indication that without President Trump, our party's establishment, the boring old guard GOP, is just as rotten as it was in 2016. In other words, there's still a lot more work to be done within our own party. Mike Lindell has a passion to help you get the best sleep of your life. And he didn't stop at the MyPillow. Mike also created the Giza Dream Bed Sheets. These sheets look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep, which is crucial for our overall health. Mike found the world's best cotton called Giza. It's ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's latest deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets, marking prices down as low as $29.98, depending on the size. Go to mypillow.com and enter promo code Dinesh. There you'll find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and so much more. Go to mypillow.com and use promo code Dinesh, or call 1-800-876-0227 for this incredible offer. Again, that's 1-800-876-0227 and use promo code Dinesh. That's Dinesh.